Welcome everyone to this special sponsored session, and we're going to be talking to Brenda Matthews, who is the author of her memoir, The Last Daughter. Belinda Publishing is really proud that we were able to recently record the audio book of this amazing story, and it's actually available for all of the libraries to order as physical, MP3 and digital copies for your BorrowBox as of this week. I want to start by paying respects to the traditional custodians of the land and waters on which we meet, the Darug Nation, their elders past and present, and we indeed recognise the cultural, social customs of all Indigenous Australians and acknowledge them as the original storytellers of the land. It is indeed, I want to make a point that this story that we're going to hear about does touch on Aboriginal children being taken from their families. And if this raises issues or concerns for you, then please feel free to get some support from the healingfoundation.org.au afterwards. My name, as I was introduced, is Natasha Boyd. I'm familiar with many of you through the marketing emails and content on your BorrowBox. I've been the content expert at BorrowBox for 5 years, and I'm based in Melbourne. And it has really been lovely to come back to Switch for a second year in a row to meet with you yesterday and today and have a bit of a dance on the dance floor yesterday. That was fabulous. Our guest today, Brenda Matthews, is a proud Wiradjuri woman. She lives with her husband Mark on Bundjalung country in Queensland. She is a mother, a grandmother, a daughter, a sister, an auntie, a storyteller and a speaker. She is the co-founder and the Indigenous Director of Learning Circle Australia, and is the co-director of the feature film The Last Daughter, a documentary of her life, which some of you might have seen when it hit cinemas in June, and is now currently streaming on Netflix. Welcome, Brenda. Thank you. Some of you might be familiar with the documentary, having already seen it, but we thought it would be a really excellent way to get into the book. And so our elevator pitch of what is this story about, we thought would be best represented by a short trailer of the documentary, and we'll just have a brief look at that now.
I've never shared this story, and I don't think anyone's heard it like this before.
When my little girl was only 2.5,
we talked adoption.
I said, oh, it'll be hard, but it'll be worth
it. She says, this is Brenda. I can live that moment forever, even if I get to be 200 years old.
When we got married, we were so happy. I had 7 children, and the whole 7 of them were taken. But we knew in our hearts that we'd get them back.
When I came back to my black family, I felt like I was intruding in on their family. I knew I had fragmented memories of a little white sister. I had to get answers. I had to go back.
This is your street, Brenda.
That's the place where we were deemed neglected children. When I went back into my welfare files, it just didn't add up. I started getting more flashbacks, more memories.
I said to her, make sure that when you get older, you come and find us. And she said, I will, I will.
I realised that there was a deeper love there that nothing could take away. And suddenly, I received this letter. What?
We thought we were the heroes, but we would end up being the villains.
They were lied to, and we were lied to. I'm sharing truth on both sides of the story. In our culture, that's what we did. We shared stories.
I'd just like to prove that this Aboriginal lady was a good mother. I looked after them.
We were just hoping to get back some of the history that we'd lost with her.
Together, we can find a way to the real truth.
The true history of this country has not been told.
I had to focus on the love. I'm just reflecting my father and mother, black and white.
such a powerful story and the documentary. When I actually dived into the book, it obviously, understandably, dealt with so much more background material. So even though there might be some of you who have actually seen the documentary, the book contains so many more details about the background family context, a lot more of the intricacies of your research and your journey through to this. I mean, I personally, Brenda, just found it so revealing. It was heartbreaking, it was angering. I had so much learning, and I just really admired your courage to actually pursue to get to the truth and find out your story, and to talk about your two families, your Aboriginal family and your white family, and try and get everyone involved to a place of healing and reconciliation. And I just wondered, what was your main motivation in trying to now share your story through these different platforms and formats?
Just to get the story out there, I think, and just to clear our mother and father's name, but also our names as neglectful parents and neglected children. But, you know, going back and looking for answers on both sides, I saw the injustice on both sides, and I think that's what made me want to share the story, you know. Sorry if I'm going to cry, but yeah, there was a lot of loss and heartbreak there. So yeah, just sharing on the story, truth on both sides of the story, made me want to delve in deeper and search for that and share the story with everyone else too.
It is so moving, and if we go back just a few years, more recently, obviously in the book you share quite a much more detail than in the documentary, where you talk about your teenage life, your adult life. You had a new career, you've had 5 children, you were newly married in your 40s, you were meeting Mark and working with him and blending your families together, but always there had seemed a disconnect with your identity, and you had this feeling of love of a little white sister, and you therefore decide to pursue to get some answers for that. I wondered why you had waited until that time, and what made you believe that this was the right time to go after those answers for yourself?
I believe it was the right time because, you know, there's a time for everything, mourning, happiness, sadness, needed. But I suppose at the time, I probably wasn't ready for that, and I couldn't see that through the pain and the trauma that I carried, and the resentment and, you know, the anger and frustration that was all along with all the whole story. But yeah, being able to focus on that love from my little white sister, but also focus on the love from my mum and dad too, that they were fighting for us to get us all back home, you know, helped me to want to delve deeper into that love too, and say, think, you know, how can I share this story out of that love, you know, and also so the forgiveness of the hurt and the pain that, you know, has been caused through the story.
And your research led you to obviously look at department files, and as you had just briefly mentioned before, it was declared that your parents, without any kind of warning or even inspection of their homes or of themselves, they were declared as neglectful parents, and they took yourself at age 2 and your 6 siblings away, and a court case confirmed that, and your siblings will leave their story to the side. They had a different experience, but you were placed in a white family for 5 years who love and raise you during that time, want to adopt you, but then at that time, they then have you taken away and returned to their Aboriginal family without any explanation to your white family. And I just wondered what you actually remembered of that time, and as I suppose more repressed feelings might have come back of your experience of having an early childhood with your white family.
Yeah, I think just the love in that, and just the memories of my little white sister, but also thinking that I was part of their family, you know, for so long, me not knowing this at the time, but felt a part of that family, found a place in that family. But then being taken home and feeling disconnected from that, but also grabbing onto that identity of a rejected little girl or hurt little girl, you know, looking out the window for my white family, when are they coming home to get me, you know, because no one explained anything to me on either side, so, you know, I didn't know the full story, but I suppose for a long time I held on to them identities, you know. On my white side, a rejected, hurt, abandoned little girl, and on my black side, a stolen child, you know, from the stolen generation. And for a long time, that was my lived experience, the trauma and the hurt and pain on both sides. And yeah, just being able to, like I said, find answers on both sides of the family, but also one strong memory that stands out, you know, I've got a few memories of my white mother mixing the cream in the mixer blades, you know, and giving them to me and Rebecca, my little white sister, but also, you know, plucking chickens out the back with my father, Mac. Just little things like that, you know, swinging doors in the kitchen, and yeah, they're so precious memories. But I think one of the hurtful ones was the memory of my white father taking me back to my mother and father's place, you know.
It was so incredibly moving, this.
Yeah, and just feeling the rejection and the abandonment, because for a long time I thought he had chosen her over me, my little white sister over me. I thought he had chosen Rebecca over me. So, you know, just holding on to that for like 40 years. It's a big, heavy thing for a little girl, I suppose, to carry. So, yeah, I didn't grow up for a long time. So,
and it was such a hard time for your white family. They had 1 week's notice to return you with no kind of counselling or explanation to you as a child, to them. They didn't even know the circumstances upon which they were returning you or from which you had come. The details in the book are so extraordinary about how you were taken and then put with a family that was also not had a check and balance, and it works out really beautifully in such a loving family. But then all of that absence of information. In the book, you really describe such a powerful moment when you reunite with your white family, and as you say, you had felt abandoned, that your father had walked you to the door, your mum so upset that she couldn't even get out of the car, Rebecca is also in the car, and you're just left, and you feeling that abandonment for decades. Then when you meet them, you realise that that is not the case, and that they had also had mistruths said to them about your family, about your parents, and the indications of what they felt. How did you come to terms with that time when you met them and the information that was now coming to the surface that neither family had actually been aware of?
Yeah, it was a bit eye-opening, you know. For a long time thinking that, you know, my white family abandoned me, but also going back and asking my mother, you know, you neglect us, you know, in the files this is what it says, is that what happened? And you know, for her to open her heart and say, no, that's not what happened. But going back to my white family and listening to them and saying, oh, because one of the first questions my white mother asked me was, is your father still an alcoholic? I was just taken back and shocked by that question, because I'd never seen my father as an alcoholic, you know, that was far from the truth that I knew.
And indeed he was a pastor.
Yeah.
You're a very religious family, and that was, you know, his kind of main identity as a pastor and a minister, so this must have been a real shock for you to hear this come from your white mother, and that's been their impression all this time, as a falsehood.
Yeah, because, yeah, that, like I said, that description didn't fit my mother and father's description, my father's description, you know, because my mother's description on that side was a single mother who couldn't look after a child, so she gave me away. But they didn't even know about the other children. They only knew about me, so they were even in shock when they saw all the other kids there when they took me back home. So, but yeah, that's how it was for a long time, and you know, it was such a good opportunity to get them, my white parents and mum to meet. to be able to share truth on both sides and tell the truth from their hearts, and no longer from somebody else telling this story about that person and that story about that person. Because for so long, my mother's thoughts were, they're them white fellas who took my daughter away, and my white side was like, that's the black fellas who couldn't even look after their daughter. So, a very traumatic time, I think, for both sides.
And for you, the young child who doesn't understand any of this at the time, and then later coming to find the department files, some of them have redacted statements that you then get uncovered, and you're able to actually see the litany of bungling and conversations that allegedly happened or meetings that happened that didn't happen. And one of the interesting things that I suppose that I grabbed from the book as I was reading it, that there was a difference around Australia with how we deal with the stolen generation time frame. So in Tasmania and South Australia, and some of you might not be aware of this, they will say that the stolen generation time period will go to 1975. In New South Wales, they will say that it only goes to 1969. Why this is relevant and would have implications for Brenda and her family is because they were taken in 1973. So do you want to just talk about that, I suppose, quest that then you went on to get your parents' files erased with the statement of being neglectful parents and you were neglected children, but also officially being recognised that you were taken from a department and are part of a stolen generation, but then you are wanting to get to a process of healing and recognition and understanding because the date, even though it says 1969, you are an example of what happened just out in the regional town that was still existing.
Yeah, for a long time, that's what they had, the line in the sand at 69, and when I reached out to them to, take responsibility for us being taken away from our mother and father, no one wanted to take responsibility, so that made me angry and frustrated, and I didn't know how to process that, so I rang Mark, and I was like, how can they say this, and this, and he's like, just write your feelings down, Brenda. So I did, and that's when it turned into a book. And being able to see that no one wanted to take responsibility, I had to take responsibility on myself, In our culture, knowledge isn't power, it's responsibility. So now I had a responsibility to carry my story a right way and find that healing through that process, because I went to the system to try to get healing and answers, someone to take responsibility, but no one didn't. So I had to take responsibility by sharing that story and uncovering the lies in that. I was like, well, how do I share this story out of that love and forgiveness that my mother and father from both sides had shared with me? So what was the question again?
That's all right. I think you phrased about how you actually find writing to be a healing process. So I think it's really timely that we move. So as time goes on, you consult with your husband, Mark, about wanting to get this story out there. And you've had a really beautiful reunion and, getting your two parents to talk together and meet. I mean, it's so, I had tears. I have tears when we hear about Rebecca, and I have tears about that moment. It's just incredibly moving, those passages. But you decide to pursue to become a co-director of a documentary version of this story. You get to work with some really fine people. I love in the documentary how you've got the young actors that we just briefly saw in that trailer who are kind of acting out the flashbacks, alongside the present day people who are all involved in what's happening now with that story. How did you find that process of seeing your life story on screen?
Oh, that was amazing, because I didn't understand what happened back then when I was 2 and taken away. So being able to see the process of going through story and these young ones playing out that role in that picture again, it helped me to understand my own story. It helped me to understand what happened to me. It helped me understand what happened to my families on both sides. So it was a really good process for me, and helped me to understand my story when I was younger. When I blocked most of it out, couldn't remember most of it. So Yeah, and it was such a relevant thing, I think, in our culture. We didn't have these house structures, so, you know, we lived out there on the land and that, and just to be able to place that little Indigenous girl into the house structure and walk the hallways and doorways of that structure helped me to go back through story and understand story on both sides. You know, I was part of two families, two homes, but I couldn't find identity, belonging or connection to either one. You know, I couldn't find home in either place, so I had to reevaluate that and then ask myself, where is home when it doesn't feel like home? So, you know, and I had to reconcile with my own hurt and pain before I could reconcile with either families, you know, and yeah, that's, for me, that's where reconciliation had to start within myself.
And in the book you describe, Mark is constantly encouraging you to write down your feelings in multiple diary entries that you share in the book that aren't in the documentary, and also some poetry that you write, really evocative of the times of how you're feeling and processing all of these really difficult and devastating and distressing moments. And then you decide, obviously, post-documentary, you're going to write a book. How did you adjust to then, from being a visual medium to then being part of this publishing book world? And, you know, how did you find that experience?
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, for us as Indigenous people, we're storytellers. We shared stories and passed them down through the generations. So being able to share story on different platforms now was, yeah, incredible. Like I said, like, these practices aren't ours, but we're a part of that now. So being able to share that on the story, you know, which is a big story on different platforms, so that everyone could listen or look with that. Yeah, it was an amazing process.
It's now obviously reached a third format because we've been able to record the audio book. So, and I actually think that's really pertinent because you hear it as a story being told to you, and it makes sense to me because Aboriginal culture, you pass stories down from generation to generation over thousands of years. And so actually being able to listen to this story, I think, will reach a whole new demographic of people who will get access to this story and be able to listen to it told to them. You obviously had made the decision not to read the memoir. We have the amazing dancer and actress Ella Ferris who takes on that role, beautifully done. And I just wondered how you have found, I guess, dealing with this audio book production, the narrator's voice, and then, you know, this idea that it's going to be existing in a third format.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, like, in our culture, the old people always told us to listen and not. So, you know, having the visual of the story on film form, and then also having it in audio, is basically doing what our elders told us to do, listen and not, you know. And I think we can all take part in that, you know. And but yeah, it was a bit weird, me not sharing my story, but I don't think it was any different to the process of someone fiddling with your words and turning your words around and putting them in a book. So yeah, so much we had a little sample of her, Ella, to listen to, and I just found her voice really smooth and sharing the story. But I suppose too, like, stories passed down through the generations, so having someone else tell that story is probably no different from me passing it down to my children or grandchildren and then sharing the story the next time around. So yeah, so basically that's the way I see it. It is a bit hard because it's not your voice and that, but that's fine with me. So.
And I know you've shared that your mum and there's family members who are really looking forward to listening to this story because it's probably their preferred way to access a book. And I should say that it's not all sadness and tragedy. There's a lot of humour. I laughed a number of times, probably when most of the passages with you and Mark are quite funny, and having met him, I can see why that is the case. You know, there's a lot of lightness, there's a lot of love, there's a lot of affirmation, and I feel like the underlying message that really comes through throughout the whole book, despite everything that happened to you and your family, is this pursuit of healing and reconciliation and getting everyone on board with this journey to move forward together. Is that what you wanted people to, I guess, take away when they listen to this story? What are you wanting them to, I suppose, get from the reading of this memoir?
Well, we can't change the past. We can't forget about the past either, you know, so it's good to acknowledge the past, but it's also good to move forward together and try to find a way how do we live together now, you know. Our Western brothers and sisters have joined the circle in this country now, and I think it's just a matter of listening and looking, you know, because there's story here, story has always been here, and story will continue to be here. So, yeah, just having Mark walk the fellows from Bunjalong before I even come along and had that connection, you know, and just seeing the banter that, you know, he has with his brothers up there in Bunjalong country. Yeah, no, it was amazing to see, but also to go on that journey and find that healing and reconciliation through our relationship now as black and white, and hopefully that could be an example of, you know, how the bigger picture in this country could be, you know, that we can't do it without each other, we need each other, you know. We all hold knowledge, but and we all carry a story, but what knowledge are we going to carry, and what story are we going to tell, you know? Are we going to keep telling the story of the past, the trauma and the hurt and pain, or are we going to start carrying a healing story and walking together, you know, and finding your place in the circle in this country now, you know, your entry point into the circle. And that's what's so good about the film. It's not just about me, it's about everyone, you know, and I think no matter what nationality you are, you can find a connection to that story, you know, because we all know that, you know, it just didn't happen to black fellas, that people, you know, were taken away from their families, white fellas were taken away from their families and forgotten children, you know, and we were all children once, you know, and we all carry hurt, pain, and trauma from our own stories. So being able to find a connection to the story, you know, no matter who you are, that was so important. I think to me to be able to share that it's not just about one person in our culture, it's about the collective. And, you know, we were always told, you know, the old people always told us, don't forget about your white brother and sister. And, you know, to be able to try to work together in this relationship as, you know, support system. We also carried that through the film and the book, and then just thought that hopefully we can make that a bigger picture in this country now.
I think it's there's a lot of learning for all of us, and only if we want to listen to it. We hope that this brief snapshot into this memoir has really resonated with you. It's a remarkable story. It's incredibly eye-opening, and there's a lot that we all have to learn. But I think also just to get an insight, I know there were previous sessions yesterday that were dealing with libraries. You know, really you guys understand the importance of having First Nation stories in your libraries for people to access, because we may not be aware of those stories, and that's the only way that we're going to find out. And of course, then the importance of projects like the Indigenous Literacy Project, which I know was also talked about yesterday, and now coming here as an example of maybe a different kind of stolen generation story that you're familiar with, because I think it's a really interesting dynamic what is presented in this memoir. So we obviously are going into another session now, but in the break we invite all of you to come and meet Brenda. She is willing to take questions at that time, because we've just had this short session, and we have 200 copies of the audio book in an MP3 version for everyone to take and get. They've all been pre-signed by Brenda, so if you want to just come and collect one, we'll just say one per person, please. And then if you want to ask Brenda a question, she's more than willing to talk to you about any of the issues that, you know, have got you thinking or questioning this situation, or perhaps your own experience involved with fostering or adoption or any of these kind of topics that we've touched on. And so you know where we are, we're just on the other side of this wall, you know, the green, we always stand out. So yeah, I'm sure that, yeah, just make sure in the break that after you've grabbed your afternoon tea that you come and visit us. We're all going to be there. So you've got Brenda and her husband Mark is there, and then of course the whole Belinda team, and we're thrilled that we're going to be able to talk to you about this further. I just want to thank you, Brenda. It's just been a really good insight into what is an incredible story. Like I said at the start, I was just so incredibly moved. I know that our libraries are going to be super keen to get this audio book on their physical shelves, in their digital collections. And really, librarians, you're the one, when there's so much on offer on the shelves, be they digital or physical, how do they find the story that might mean something to changing their view or opening their eyes and just learning something, or being encouraged and inspired? It's an absolute moving story, it's an inspiring story, it's an important story of our history and also a way forward. So I just want to thank you, and we really look forward to getting it out there and supporting you in that, but also to see what you do next. I'm sure this is only just the beginning from this kind of late in life, experience that you've had in getting your two families back. And we should say that it does have that, happy ending with your mother meeting, your Aboriginal mother meeting your white mother and father, and just having that unity there. I mean, it was just incredibly moving.